board, and we're going to work a lot of multiplication problems here to give you some practice. Okay, now we're going to just work a ton of problems to give you some practice with multiplying integers together. Feel free to watch this part of this lesson a few times. The first time you can just watch it just to reinforce what we've learned. The second time you watch it, you can pause the video after each problem goes up and try to work the problems yourself. It's a great way to practice. So let's go right to it. Let's say, start with something easy. Let's say we have 5 times 4. 5 times 4. Well, 5 times 4 is 20. And the answer is positive because we have positive times positive. The signs are the same, so we have a positive answer. Now, what if we had 5 times negative 4? Well, again, we're going to have 20 as the answer, but the signs are different. So we're going to have a negative sign in our answer, negative 20. Now, what if we had negative 5 times negative 4? And by the way, you usually don't write multiplication like this because having this multiplication symbol with this negative symbol, it's right next to each other. Usually you're going to write it like this, but I just want to show you different ways that you can do it. So 5 times 4 is going to give you 20, and the signs are the same, both negative. So you're going to have a positive answer there. Negative times negative always gives positive. That was the third case that we just talked about. Number 4, let's say negative 5 times 4. Again, 5 times 4 is 20, and the signs are different. So we're going to have a negative sign there in the answer. So really, it's just a few little things to remember. And after that, you're really in good shape. So let's say for number 5, we'll have negative 1 times 4. Negative 1 times 4. Well, 1 times 4 does give us 4, and the answer has to be negative because the signs are different. Negative times positive. So number 6, let's call it negative 1 times negative 4. 1 times 4, again, gives us 4, and the answer in this case is positive because negative times negative gives us positive. The signs are the same. So under number 7, we have negative 1 times 0. Well, anything times 0 is 0. So there's really no need to look at signs because 0 is right in the middle of the number line. It doesn't have a positive or negative at all. You never put a sign in front of 0. So number 8, let's say 4 times 0 times 9. Well, you should see, yeah, you could say 9 times 4 is 36, 36 times 0, but you can just sort of look at it. Anytime you have a bunch of numbers here and they multiply with 0 in there anywhere, the answer is going to be 0 because 4 times 0 gives you 0. 0 times 9 also gives you 0. Okay? Now let's go and look at, let's say, number 9. So let's say we have 2 times negative 3 times negative 4. Well, when you're doing these multiplications with more than one number, please do not try to do them in your head. So let's take it one step at a time. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 because 2 times 3 is 6, and these signs are different. So they have to have a negative here. But don't forget, we still have to multiply by this negative 4. So we just write it like that. We've done this multiplication, and we carry this along because we haven't done that yet. Now, 6 times 4 gives you 24, and the sign is positive because these are both the same. So do yourself a favor. Don't try to do all this in your head. That's just not going to be the right way to do this. Do the first multiplication first, write it down, carry the rest of the problem along, and then do the second one later. And not only are you going to not make any mental errors doing it that way, but if you happen to make an error somewhere in your work, you can always go back and look and see what you did. If you don't write any of this stuff down in the middle, you'll never know. If you get the wrong answer, you'll never know why. Okay? Now let's say 10 is negative 5 times negative 1 times 5. So the same sort of thing. What I want you to do is multiply these two first. 1 times 5 is 5, and negative times negative gives us positive. But don't forget, we still have to multiply this by this 5. We haven't done that yet. And then 5 times 5 is, of course, 25. So the answer is a positive 25. What if we had negative 1 times negative 2 times negative 3? Negative 1 times negative 2 times negative 3. Same sort of thing. Work with these two first. 1 times 2 gives us 2. Negative times negative gives us positive. So we're done with that. We still have to multiply by negative 3. We haven't done that yet. And then 2 times 3 gives us 6, and these signs are different, so we have to stick a negative at the end. That's the proper way to multiply a long string of numbers. Okay, number 12. Let's say we had negative 10 multiplied by 25. 10 times 25 is 250. And the sign has to be negative because both of those signs are different. Okay, switch colors back just to make it clear. Let's say we had, for 13, let's say we had 2 times negative 3 plus 3. 2 times negative 3 plus 3. Well, one thing you need to learn is that when you have a bunch of multiplication and then you also have some addition going on, you always have to do the multiplication first, or if it's division, you have to do the division first. So multiplication and division always come before addition or subtraction. So the first thing we have to do here is multiply these. And we're going to mess with this addition later. We'll deal with that later. So 2 times negative 3 gives us negative 6 because the signs are different. 2 times 3 gives us 6, but we still have to add this 3 to it because that's what we haven't done that yet. Now you have an addition problem from before. And if you think about it, what we're going to do here, the signs are different. So the rule for addition is anytime the sign is different, you subtract the number. 6 minus 3 gives you 3. And the sign of the answer comes from the bigger absolute value. The larger absolute value in this case is negative 6. That's the guy that has the largest number independent of its sign. So the sign comes from that. So that is back in your addition section. You can go review that if you're not too sure about that. We covered a lot of problems teaching this. But the main thing in this problem is to teach you and to learn multiplication always comes before addition or subtraction. That's something that you're going to learn a lot in this class. So number 14, let's say 2 times negative 3 minus 3. So same exact problem, but you have a minus 3. So we'll have exactly the same thing over here, negative 6, but we'll have a minus 3. 2 times 3 gave us the negative 6, and then we have to subtract 3. Now when you think about back from the rules of subtraction, if we have a negative 6, and we take away from it more, so we're borrowing more, then you have to be getting more and more negative. So you'd have a negative 9 fair answer there, because you can think of it multiple ways. You can think of negative 6 and then going more negative to negative 9. That's probably the easiest way to think of it. And so that you can think of it in terms of the number line. We did a lot of problems talking about addition and subtraction of integers. To go back and review that. So let's do number 15. Let's say we have negative 2. And let's say we have it multiplied by negative 3, and then we have plus 6. Now, you usually don't see it written like this in algebra with a multiplication and a negative number with the dot here. But I'm writing it like that because a lot of your books will test you. Basically, this is multiplication just like the parentheses. Just like the parentheses. So don't get too confused by it, and don't fall into the trap that you're going to add these numbers first. You always do multiplication first. So negative 2 times negative 3 is going to give us positive 6. We still have to add this 6. We haven't done that yet, and 6 plus 6 is 12. So we can add that in just like that. So, you know, we're going to continue to do more problems in this section, but the main thing for you to learn is 2 things. 1, how do you multiply numbers together? And hopefully you're getting the hang of that. 2, if you ever see multiplication or division, you'll see, multiplication or division, in the same kind of line with addition or subtraction, you always got to multiply the numbers first or divide the numbers first before you get into any addition or subtraction if they're all on the same level like this. So we're going to talk more about that in a couple of sections when we learn order of operations, but I'm just trying to teach you a little bit of it now because it's good for you to start learning this now. Now, let's say for number 16, we have 12 times negative 10 minus 5. So when you look at something like this, when it's written this way, it's one reason why we don't do this. You're not really sure, should I multiply, should I subtract, what should I do first? But you got to remember, this is multiplication. Multiplication always comes first. So 12 times 10 is 120. And it's got to be negative because these signs are different. These 2 numbers are different signs. So negative 120. We still have to subtract 5. And going back to our subtraction lesson, what we're doing here is we're starting at negative 120 and we're going more negative by subtracting 5 more. So this is going to be negative 125. This being negative 125. So 17, let's say we have 7 times negative 4 minus 7. 7 times negative 4, 7 times 4 is 28. Negative sign goes out front because these guys are different signs. We still have to subtract our 7, so we have exactly the same thing, negative 28 minus 7. So we're starting at negative 28 and we're going more negative, 7 more negative. So we have negative 35. But basically what we're doing is we're adding the absolute values here of the numbers and we're sticking a negative out front because really this is, even though it's subtraction, it's like negative plus negative. And if you remember back to your section on negative plus negative, you're always going to add the numbers and just stick a negative sign out front. I prefer to think of it in terms of a number line. Even if I'm not drawing a number line, I just think, okay, here I am at 28, and I'm going to go more negative because I'm subtracting, so I've got to get to a bigger negative number like that. Okay, 18 is, let's say, 5 times negative 13 minus 3. All right, what's 5 times 13? 5 times 13 is 65. And the sign has got to be negative, so you're going to stick a negative sign out front because these signs are different. Negative, positive times negative is going to give us a negative, and we're still going to have to subtract this 3. So we start at negative 65, and we go 3 more negative, so we're going to have a negative 68. All right, and let's look at number 19. Let's say we have negative 4 times negative 8 plus 30. Well, 8 times 4 is 32, and it's going to be positive because these are both the same sign. They're both negative. And we still have to add the 30 from our problem, and so what we're going to have in the end is 62. There's nothing, nothing to do really here. You just add them up. The sign is positive because it's a regular addition. Now let's change colors just to mix it up a little bit. Let's say we have negative 6 minus a negative 5. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this. We already talked about this being adding the opposite, which it is adding the opposite, but I want to explore something and share something with you. We already told you, anytime you have subtraction of a negative number, we simply add the opposite. So we put a plus here and we put a plus here, and that's totally true. That's exactly true. When you're doing your work, just remember that. That's something you're going to use forever. But I want to show you where it comes from. When you have this here, this is really sort of the same thing as negative 6 plus, you kind of have a negative 1 here times negative 5. This is what this means. This negative here, it's kind of like a negative 1 sitting out in front here, and this negative 5 is just sitting there. So when you do this, what you're going to have is negative 6. Negative times negative is going to give you a positive 5. So you see what I've gotten here at the end is the same thing as what we usually call add the opposite. But I never told you, why do we add the opposite? You might have thought to yourself, Jason, why are we adding the opposite before? I don't even know why. I just told you to remember that. Well, the reason why is because this is really like a negative 1 sitting out here, and it's multiplied by what's in here. Negative times negative gives you positive, and that's why it all turns positive. So you can add these two things together by just doing your integer addition. The signs are different, so we're going to subtract the numbers to get 1, and the sign is going to come from the absolute value of the bigger number. So I'm going to have negative 1. All right, 21. Negative 12 minus negative 24. Right? And you can simply add the opposite just like you want. You can do this multiplication business, but really, I just was doing that to explain it to you so you know where it comes from. But you can just simply add the opposite. So what you're going to have is negative 12 plus 24. And over here, when you're doing the addition, the signs are different. So you're going to subtract the numbers, and you're going to get a 12. That's the rule. And the sign comes from the larger absolute value, so it's positive 12. So the answer is positive 12 in that case. And for 22, let's say you had a negative sign out front, negative 1, minus 2, minus 3. So negative 1, minus 2, minus 3. How do we deal with this? Well, you always want to do what's inside of the parentheses first. That's another little rule that we're going to get to and talk a lot more about later, but I'm giving you a little bit of a preview. Anytime you see parentheses, you always want to do what's inside those parentheses first. You can kind of think of the parentheses as being this nice little bubble. And inside this bubble is something. And you always have to go and do what's inside that bubble before you can look at what's outside the bubble, right? So that's kind of what parentheses are. So let's work inside of the parentheses first. -1 minus 2. What does that equal to? Well, you're starting at -1, you're going 2 more negative, so that's going to be -3 inside here, but you still have to subtract this 3. We haven't even done that yet, right? Now, again, working inside the parentheses, I'm going to keep this out because we haven't done anything with that yet. -3 minus 3 is going to give you what? You start at -3 and you go 3 more negative, so it's going to be -6. That's what's inside the parentheses. Now, here's where you need to use your multiplication. This negative is really, even though it's not written here, it's basically like having a -1 out here multiplied by -6. Even though you don't write the -1 there, that's what it is. You have an implied -1 here. So this is really a multiplication by -1. So negative times negative gives you positive, and of course 1 times 6 gives you 6. So you're going to have a positive 6 for your answer. So we're going to do a couple of substitution type of problems here in a second, but the main thing is to remember is parentheses, if you see them, you have to do what's inside of them first. It's like a bubble. You have to go in there and work on that before you work on anything else. And if you have multiple things to add or subtract, try to work them in sequence. And if you ever see multiplication on the same level with addition or subtraction, then go ahead and work on the multiplication first. The only reason that we dove inside here and did the subtraction first is because it was inside the parentheses, and that always comes first. If you see parentheses, you have to work on the parentheses first, because really that's sort of what algebra is telling us. When we have a parentheses there, we are basically telling the student or whoever you're working with, that inside of those parentheses is supposed to happen first. It's like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. In order to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you have to get the jelly and you have to get the peanut butter, and then you get the bread and you put it on top of the bread. But you have to get the peanut butter and jelly first. There's something you always have to do first. In algebra, parentheses is like getting the peanut butter and jelly. You have to work on that first. It's something you're going to remember. All right, now this is really nothing too different, but let's say we had a variable a called -3, and let's say we had a variable b that was equal to 2, and let's say we had a variable c which was equal to 4, and d which was equal to -2. And so we want to just practice working on our expressions, so what we call evaluating our expressions. So what would 4a be? When you say something like 4a, that means 4 times a because they're sitting right next to each other. So what you would have is 4 times a, which is -3. 3 times 4 gives you 12, and the answer is negative because these signs are different. So you see, nothing different from what we've been doing before. The only difference is we have to plug in the value of the letter that we have. That's what a variable is. Okay, 24. Let's say 5c, or 5 times c. So what we would have is 5 times, here's c over here, which is 4. 5 times 4 gives you 20, and the sign is positive because they're both the same sign. 12 times b. Same thing. You have 12. b is 2. 12 times 2 is 24. Sign is positive because both of those are the same. What if you had -15 times d? -15 times d. So you have -15, and d is -2. And so what you need to do is look, 15 times 2 is 30. Negative times negative gives me positive, so there's nothing else to do there. It's already positive. 27. All right, 27. Let's say we had 3a plus 4. 3a plus 4. So what we're going to have is 3 times a, which is -3, plus 4. So what we need to do is work on the multiplication first, because remember, multiplication always comes before addition or subtraction when they're on the same level. 3 times 3 is 9, but the signs are negative, so it's -9 plus 4. And to add these, you have to use the rules of addition. So the signs are different, so we subtract them. So we're going to put a 5. The sign comes from the absolute value of the larger number. So we're going to get a -5 there. 28. let's say we have 4c minus 2. 4 times c minus 2. So if we have 4 and c is 4 and minus 2. So we're plugging in the value of 4. 4 times 4 gives us positive 16. Minus 2, we still have to do the minus 2. 16 minus 2 is 14. And so that's the answer. So let's do one more, and that'll be the end. So we'll have the very last problem. We'll have 7 times a times c minus b. So it looks complicated. It looks like an algebra thing, but really you're just plugging in values for what you know. And in this case, you know the value of a. The value of a is a negative 3, so we'll put a negative 3 up there. You know the value of c, that's 4. And we're subtracting the value of b, which is 2. And so again, you always work on your multiplication before you work on your addition or subtraction. So let's work on these two numbers first. 7 times 3 is 21. And the answer is going to be negative because these signs are different. So it's negative 21. Don't forget, we still have to multiply by 4, and we still have to subtract 2. So we're going to do it one step at a time. 21 times 4 is 84, and the sign is going to be negative because, again, these signs are different. But don't forget, we still have to subtract the 2. Now it becomes down to subtraction of integers. You start at negative 84, and you go more negative by 2, and so you're going to have an answer of negative 86. Negative 86 for your answer. So you take it one step at a time in pre-algebra. You plug in your numbers, you write them down, you work on a little bit at a time, gradually getting down until you get to the answer. Never, ever, ever try to look at a problem in pre-algebra and do it in your head. It's tempting to try to multiply this stuff in your head, but you'll get the wrong answer eventually. And not only that, but you won't be able to follow your work if you make a mistake, and your teacher won't know what you're trying to do if you don't write this stuff down. I am doing this exactly the same way that I do it when I work problems. I'm not working it in any special way for you in this course. I'm writing it down exactly like I do when I'm working my own problems. So trust me, it's a good habit to get into. I'm Jason. I hope you've learned something in this section. We've covered a tremendous amount of material, and it's very important. Multiplying integers is something you'll use every day as you go into the rest of pre-algebra and on into algebra and beyond. There's a few simple cases. One of them you learned when you were in 4th or 5th grade and you learned how to multiply. The other two are pretty easy to remember, and you just apply them and make sure you write everything down, because if you don't, you'll miss a sign somewhere and then you'll get the wrong answer, the wrong sign of the answer, and that'll get you into trouble. So practice your problems, watch this section a few times if you need to, practice the problems I've given you here on the board, go forth and practice, and with that will come confidence, and you guys will get good at multiplying integers.